Microphone check, 1, 2, what is this? It's the 5'7" assassin in the podcast business. I am your host, Rohan Patra, the rap music plug at your service.
Here we are again at the end of a rainbow.
The Rap Music Plug podcast presented by QLC TV is the remedy to the I don't have anything good to listen to problem. Through in-depth album and song reviews, as well as artist interviews and general rap commentary sprinkled in between on all of what the mainstream and underground rap scenes have to offer, this is your one-stop shop to knowing what to add to your queue, play next, or pop into your record player. Welcome to the show. What is up, family? Today I have a very, very special guest with me. He is a rapper, educator, and now father, creator of many projects over the years, but particularly in 2021, he's really put in a ton of work, having dropped Scenic Deluxe with Nick Arcade, We Dress the City with Our Names with August Fanon, and now his latest project released under Backwoodz Studioz, Trapdoor with Messiah Musik. He's an absolutely unbelievable lyricist who can paint a picture with his rhymes with the best of them, in my opinion. So I'm pleased to welcome Defcee. How are you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Just, tired and overwhelmed and, all of the things that come with being a new dad. But apart from that, I've been really fortunate to have gotten a reception for my music that's unprecedented at this point. So I really appreciate all of the support people have been showing, all of the interest that people like yourself have been showing. And of course, huge shout out to Messiah Musik and Backwoodz Studioz for really remaining patient and seeing this through to its conclusion. So yeah, pretty much very grateful, very overwhelmed in a variety of different ways, and very sleep deprived. But apart from all of those things, man, it's mostly very positive.
Yeah, man, the reception that I've been reading on this latest record, but just throughout the year with the other projects you released, it's been pretty phenomenal. And I'm really happy for you on that note.
Thank you.
It's crazy too, because I think the first time you got on my radar was, I keep repeating this because it's true, and you're another example, is that August Fanon Iceberg Theory record. They had like hundreds, but Dispatches from the Kali Yuga.
Yep.
That was a record dropped late 2020, and you're on one of those songs. And I remember I tweeted about it. I was like, whoever dropped, because I wasn't familiar with the music, but I was like, whoever had that verse, and I put a quote in it. I was like, I need to find more music by this guy. And then Iceberg Theory is like, oh, that's Defcee. I was like, okay, cool. Bet. Let me check this guy out. Wow. That was the fucking gateway drug, that album, to so many artists, and you being one of the best results of that.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Yeah, from the get-go, I've just been very astonished by the way you write. And I know we're going to get into a lot of that and just like your thought process making music. But before we get into any of your recent run, you're from Chicago, and growing up in Chicago.
I'm from, just to kind of correct it a little bit, I was born in Chicago, but I was raised in a suburb of Chicago called River Forest. It's about 5 to 10 minutes west of city limits. And I say that, I like to specify that not because, obviously the Chicago hip hop community raised me. So it's not that I want to, and Chicago in general welcomed me with open arms, but it's more so because I grew up privileged. I grew up in a very wealthy suburb, and there are a lot of hurdles that people have to leap, especially Black and brown people in Chicago, that I did not have to leap based on where I grew up. So the one thing that I don't want to do is, if people from the city claim me as part of the city, that's great, but I don't want to claim the city if I didn't have to experience what was happening there in order to, be who I am now,
No, that's a great point. Yeah. That's really important. I'm glad you mentioned that. I feel that's really important to call out, because the experience, if you're growing up in where you grew up clearly, and then where someone else grew up in more of the inner city, like the experience, the life experiences, the hurdles, it's not even comparable. But as you mentioned, you did say that you were very much welcomed with open arms, and that's really great to hear. And that speaks to, I think, the genre's ability to truly, if you have good intentions, if you have a good heart, if you just love the craft, like, it will welcome you. It's not needing to fit in a certain box, a certain background, as long as you just got respect, you know? And one thing I really like about the rap scene that I've found throughout my exploration into Chicago specifically, and that kind of greater Chicago area, is that it seems very tight knit. I always, like, I think even more so honestly than I see in other scenes, it just seems like people are really like repping each other, making room for one another on records. And people like you, Solar 5, Green Slime, like, I just seem like you guys are always repping each other. It's just really beautiful to see. What do you love the most about the Chicago hip hop scene, and what about hip hop generally kind of like drew you into actually creating it yourself and participating in a more significant scale?
So what I love the most about Chicago's hip hop scene is that every type of hip hop is made here, and it's made very well. And I think there are very few other cities that can say the same. I think the Bay Area for sure can say that. Los Angeles can say that. Detroit can say that as well. But, and that's just in the United States. I think Toronto and London can probably say that too. But I think you would be hard pressed to find anywhere that isn't any of the places I named that makes as much music at a high quality level as Chicago in such diverse ways. And it's interesting that you said that the Chicago hip hop scene seems close knit, because we had a reputation for quite some time as a barrel of crabs, just kind of, you know, people not really reaching down to the next generation, or people feeling like they had to compete for a limited number of spots. And there are still rappers, I think, who operate with that mentality today, but the difference is it's kind of fewer and farther between than it used to be. And a major reason why is because I think a lot of us, A, learned from the mistakes of some of the people who came before us. B, we had OGs in the generation of Chicago hip hop artists that came before us, immediately before us. So I'm thinking of Tomorrow Kings and Lamont Manuel, and people who really kind of helped put us on in ways that they were not put on, which then was like, okay, cool. The only way I can pay this back is to pay it forward to whoever is going to be up next in Chicago. And people like Solar 5, in addition to just in Slime, in addition to being incredible rappers and producers, because they're good at everything, which really pisses me off when I have to make a song with them. But I walk in the studio, I'm like, damn, he's over here chopping stuff up on the MP. He's over here chopping stuff up in Ableton. I'm over here with my little pen and pad, just trying to keep up on the rap end. Cause then they'll make a fire beat and then they'll out rap me on the same thing.
Oh my God.
And I'll just be like, okay, cool. Now I can't even just pull my own weight. I gotta like hold my own in general, in terms of just even being able to qualify to be there, because I don't do as many things as well as they do. But Slime and Solar 5 were running a studio space called 406 that was really an intersection of a bunch of different subgenres within Chicago hip hop, for lack of a better term, that kind of came together there. So you had people like Lucky who were going through there, people like Vic Mensa, Chance the Rapper, Mick Jenkins. You had No Name was in there, Nico Segal, just a lot of very gifted musicians for a few years were just in and out of that space working. And I think from that, there was a desire for a lot of us to just kind of see each other succeed in a variety of ways. And initially, And also the reason why me, Slime, and Solar put on for each other is because we've known each other for over 10 years. So that's another thing too. Those are my brothers. I tell those dudes I love them. They tell me that back. Slime will tell me that and then roast me for saying it. But you know, like that's kind of the tight knit bond that I have with a lot of people in Chicago, because again, like I'm not from the city. People did not have to put on for me. People did not have to welcome me into the scene. People did not have to check me, right? Because I think that I used to tell people I was from Chicago in high school, and then I had an OG who would check me on that. And it wasn't because it came from a place of love and care. It wasn't coming from a place of, you know, what are you doing here? Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that a big reason why Chicago's hip hop community is so tight knit now, and something that I love about it, is because people just had to work together on stuff and grow with each other, and people were able to kind of watch each other's trajectory rise over the years. So I'm thinking of people like No Name and Pivot and Big Jenkins, Saba, you know, people who I was in studios with and may have even made music with, who are just, in addition to being very talented, had an incredible work ethic and have earned everything that they have. So I can't, and it's also an attitude, kind of their mentality. A lot of us who are older adopted it. Like we kind of set our egos to the side, and which was tough for some of us. It was tough specifically for me. There's a song on Trapdoor called Scapegrace where I talk about it. But it's tough to set aside that ego of really saying to yourself, like, oh, this person is X amount of years younger than me, was on the open mic list when I was the feature at the open mic, but they were able to make a career in music while I was still struggling to put, you know, life together with a part-time job that had full-time hours. So it's, I think, something that a lot of us had to kind of mature together, build together, let go of a lot of ego-driven stuff, and then just try to put on for the generations that came after us. Because if I look at Oakland, for example, people like Too Short, E40, even somebody like Hammer, they put on for the younger MCs there. And then somebody like Mr. Fab puts on for the younger MCs there, and so on and so forth. I look at Houston and Jay Prince. I look at what Pimp C did there and who he tried to bring together. I just look at a bunch of different cities that had scenes that were smaller than Chicago's, but did a much better job of unifying and putting on for one another. And I think that's what I love about Chicago hip hop at the moment, is apart from 2 or 3 people, I think that we all have that same mentality of, let's check our egos, leave our egos at the door, and see what we can do to really turn this into something that's bigger than all of us.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, to answer your second question, I got into hip hop because I had 2 god sisters who were older than me, who were really into Crisscross, and they dragged my dad to a Crisscross concert and brought home a cassette copy of the Jump single. And that was the first time that I'd ever
heard hip hop.
Yeah. And it was just on from there. I just fell in love with the genre.
So early on, there was no growing period. You were just immediately like, fuck, this is it.
Yeah. But I mean, I wasn't studious about it, right? Like, I think I was 2 years old, so I still was, I loved Crisscross and all that, but I was also like listening to Rafi, you know, and like all of the stuff that in Sesame Street tapes and all of the stuff that, you know, any kid would listen to. And then at a certain point, it became, I'm listening to the radio and I'm hearing Juvenile and Jay-Z and Method Man and Redman. And then from there, it was kind of like, because I didn't have control over the radio, I could only really listen to the radio. I wasn't getting an allowance. It wasn't like I could spend money on whatever I wanted to spend money on. And then from there, eventually I was tuned into a radio station called Power 92, which is one of the two major hip hop stations in Chicago. And they had a mix show that was run by a guy named DJ Ferris, who was a DJ in the Heavy Hitters Network with like DJ Enough and a lot of people from Hot 97 and around the country, really. So listening to that mix show was when I really was tuning in around the time that like Jay-Z and Nas first started battling. So that was kind of my introduction to that side of hip hop. And then within that year, I'm listening to The Blueprint and Stillmatic. I'm listening to Iron Flag by Wu-Tang. Like that's my first Wu-Tang album that I'm tuned into.
Interesting.
And eventually what happened was I started reading The Source every month. I didn't miss an issue for like 4 years. We got high-speed internet at the house. So I'm like downloading a whole bunch of music and really doing the research and studying as much as I can and absorbing as much as I can by osmosis. And I had written my first rap when I was in the 6th grade, when I was 11. And then as I got older, I started to take it a little bit more seriously and become a little bit more passionate about it. And then when I got to high school, I was involved in this spoken word program. It was an after school program with like dozens of kids. And like, I think the first year I did it, it was over 100 kids were in it, and found other people who were into hip hop. They were putting me on to Company Flow. They were putting me on to Chino XL and Razcast and Mad Villainy and all of these really dope underground hip hop artists from around the world and from here. So, you know, I was listening to Typical Cats for the first time, and I was listening to Vakil for the first time, and the Mole Men compilations, and Gravel Pit, which was Matlock and Rusty Chains, and Juice, and all of that stuff really, if I were to look back on it, kind of informed what it was I valued as a rapper. So then obviously the next step was I'm either writing like Nas, if I'm being introspective, I'm writing like Big L when I want to get into that battle rap bag, or I'm writing like, you know, I'll listen to music I made when I was 14, whatever I've decided to keep because the rest of it is gone because I can't listen to it without cringing. But I'll listen to certain joints and I'll be like, oh, okay, like this was my Ghostface bag. This was my Raekwon bag. These were the different people I was listening to and studying and really trying to, even like my Immortal Technique bag, trying to see what I could do in order to, you know, I think emulate, right? You emulate before you innovate as an MC. So I was trying on a bunch of styles to see what would fit. And it took a long time, but that kind of is what kept me going, just the pursuit of
elevating your craft. Yeah. What you said that you mentioned about like what you value as a rapper, like in rapping, like what are those things? Like what are the kind of elements? Like introspection, honesty, punchline quality, like what is it?
I think I used to be somebody who was really into like punchlines, internal rhyming and all that. And then I think a thing that I had to grow up and realize, and actually something Woods said once shifted this perspective for me too. He said, if you look at talent, everybody is given a different blade, right? So some people have like this huge broadsword. And I'm thinking of people like Crooked Eye and Joel Ortiz and Royce the 5'9" and Lupe Fiasco and Mickey Fax. And you got to keep that blade sharp. Some people have, maybe it's a pocket knife, but if you keep that blade sharp, then that's all you need to do in order to be good at rapping. So for example, what makes Too Short a great rapper might not necessarily be what makes Mickey Fax a great rapper. So even if the criteria is different, you can still acknowledge greatness when you hear it. And there's also a Coltrane quote which is you can play a shoestring if you're sincere. And that's something else that's kind of driven how I've looked at things as well, where it's just like, and obviously I appreciate rappers who are able to find interesting cadences and pockets, who say interesting things, rappers who have unique voices, rappers who are able to articulate certain complex emotions in ways that we might not have encountered before as listeners. But I rock with everything, man. As long as it's made well, I mess with it. And I've been like this week, I've been really on my commutes to and from work studying like Career Crooks, Zilla Rocca's album with
that's
Small
such
Pro.
a good record.
Fire.
Such a good record.
Never at Peace, really dope. Vegas Vic by Zilla Rocca, crazy. But I've been studying that right along to next to like the Future self-titled album, or Hendrix, or the songs I really love from the Lil Baby album, from the deluxe edition of the Lil Baby album, and Wayne and Megan Thee Stallion and Tierra Whack and Samira Truth. I Got Bands for the Moon Landing album, which is crazy.
Love that.
So, and Makami as well. Really just trying to sit down, listen to music, absorb what I can by osmosis. And then when it's time for me to produce stuff after consuming so much, I think it comes out in the work.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that idea of the pocket blade versus the broad blade, because at the end of the day, it all depends on the listener, but I don't particularly care if a particular artist doesn't do, or doesn't try to even like do a million different things in their music, but they just do a couple things or one thing really well.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go to them for that thing. I'm not thinking, but you can't make a club banger for me. It's like, I don't care. Yeah. I'm looking for something. And if you can do all of it, that's cool. But it doesn't even really, I'm a particular person that I like to, I don't need everything from an artist. And sometimes, in most of the time, honestly, I feel like that's a big problem in more of like the mainstream circles, is that people try to do too much and they spread themselves thin, where they're like not playing to their strengths. And it's like, you can tell either they're chasing a bag or they're doing something that someone told them to do, but they're not doing what they even probably want to do. And you can tell, yeah, you made that radio hit and that's trash. It's not because you're a bad rapper, it's because you don't even want to do this song. And I can tell, and that sincerity thing, I can tell you don't care about this song. And it's like, I don't like that. That's not good music.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would argue that it's happening in the underground too. It's not just the mainstream anymore. I think there are so many different avenues that have removed a lot of the roadblocks that the industry put up between people and the ability to record and release music.
Yeah.
So there are people in the underground too who, you know, it's like, you've been making the same album for X amount of years. Why would I tune in? I want to hear, like, that's really kind of, for me, maybe that's what I value as an artist, is either you can do the same thing, but you always find a different way to do it, or, you know, every project that you release has a different intention or a different concept or theme and motif behind it, so that I'm tuned in. So I think about, I've been listening to Freddie Gibbs for 13 years. And the content has kind of changed slightly as his life has changed.
Yeah, slightly. But, yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
But it's not altogether entirely different from what he was doing back when the Miseducation of Freddie Gibbs dropped. The only difference is he's trying more things as a rapper, right? Yeah. So like he might have been rapping about the same stuff for the past 13 years with, you know, some exceptions, but he's innovated how he's done it, the producers he's worked with, the way he structures his songs. So then that keeps him interesting. He can continue to rap about the same stuff and it'll keep him interesting, versus, yeah, I mean, there are just some rappers where it's the same approach, same subject matter,
same sound, yeah.
And it's not as interesting. I would rather go listen to Future at that point. I would rather go listen to Young Thug at that point. I would rather go listen to people who, even if they fall flat on their face on some songs, are able to strike gold with other songs, because they're not afraid to just try something out and see if it works.
Yeah, this is something I was talking with Doof last week when I interviewed him about Doom. obviously Doom is a guy that like had, even if you take away all of the crazy concepts and his like all that shit, at its core, most of the time, Doom was being Doom on every record, but they all sound very intentionally different, and there's something else. And a lot of times, it's simple. He just linked up with another producer, and I find like that's something that I just don't know. I kind of question, to your same point, like why don't rappers try to go for a different sound? You can keep everything the same. You can have the same content. I really appreciate it a lot of times when people just go on a different sound, and I'm like, damn, that's really good. Freddie Gibbs is a perfect example. Makes a really, really trap classic, like really modern feeling, with the blurred out bass with Kenny Beats. I fucking love that record. That's such a fun album. And then he drops Bandana, like just, but it's still Freddie Gibbs. He's still being Freddie Gibbs, being charismatic, the similar content. But yeah, I totally mess with that thought. For one thing I want to get into before we get into any of the music you've dropped is that, from what I understand, after you released your Damn Near Grown project in 2015, you took a pretty significant step back from music. You got a master's in education. You focused on teaching. You got engaged. Big milestone as well. Why did you feel like you needed to take this time off? And in hindsight, are you glad you did it?
So I don't think it was a conscious decision to take time off, to be honest with you. I think there were a few things that have happened, and I appreciate that question. And I've been really trying to think about it a little bit more past year or so. But one of the things I think was I expected Damn Near Grown to do more than it did, considering the features and the production credits. And that was my attempt to make like, I feel like a phrase such as middle of the road implies mediocrity. And I wasn't trying to make anything mediocre. I was trying to make something great, but I wanted something that was going to be able to catch as many people as possible. And I had worked on it for 7 years. That's when I had gotten the first beat from it. I had invested more money in it than I'd ever invested in my music before. And people talked about it. People rocked with it. We had my then girlfriend and now wife had, without really telling me, and she was the one who was a major driving force behind my even putting that album out, because I was about to quit. I was just disillusioned, and I thought the game had passed me up. So she had like made hats that we wound up selling out of on the Bandcamp, and that kind of made me feel like a lot was possible. And at the same time, I was not, it wasn't that I was not writing. I stayed writing that whole time. Before Damn Near Grown even came out, I was working on stuff for Trapdoor. But I think it was more so just trying to take my time and be intentional with what I was creating, because before I tried to make something with a whole bunch of other people in mind, and it just didn't work the way that I thought it was going to work. So instead, I just wanted to really take what I was doing seriously and sharpen it to the best of my ability before I started putting music out there again.
Okay. And so you were saying, you mentioned that you were actually thinking of quitting at one point. Like, did this, so you're saying it wasn't much of a conscious break. Did you ever actually seriously think that, like, even after maybe like a year in, because that was like 2015, a year in or so, like, did you actually think this could be it? Like, I've released my music, I've moved on to this teaching career, I have a wife now, like, music is over for me? Like, that actually came as a real thought to you?
No, mainly because I think what I have since learned is that music is my way of staying sane. So I'm gonna walk around with all of these bars in my head all of the time and not write them down, and then I'm gonna record the songs but not release them. That just doesn't, what purpose does that serve, really? Because in my mind, once you've made your art public, it should probably remain public. So apart from, there's music I'm not proud of that, it's kind of like, all right, let's keep that in the cut. But Yeah, I mean, I think I had gotten to a point where on multiple occasions, I just was not reaping the benefits of the music.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was because I was wrestling with the same thing that a lot of artists wrestle with, which is, who even cares?
Yeah.
If I stop making music tomorrow, nobody's gonna be upset or frustrated with that. But it also did not stop the fact that I kept writing raps. Like at this point, I've been doing it for damn near 2/3 of my life. So why would I stop?
Yeah.
Especially if I can continue to surprise myself. I still love it. I still love making it. And the only way I'd actually quit would be if I stopped loving it. If I stopped wanting to do it, if everything I did started to feel forced, and if I ran out of things to say that were interesting, then I think at that point it would be time to hang it up. But as I grow up and as I experience more and more of life, I think I'm grateful that I'm still rapping because I have this healthy way to kind of process these experiences and put them in the hands of people who might find what I have to say useful.
Yeah, and when you say that you've been rapping for a long time, like 2/3 of your life, um, what I find pretty great and like really, I don't know, reassuring or just inspiring is that I know that especially with Trapdoor, like you've recorded a lot of those songs, like actually you wrote it much earlier in the past, like 5 years ago, let's say. But the music you've released in 2021 specifically, like it just seems to be that you're rapping the best you ever had.
Mm.
And I find this is something that we're starting to see just kind of generally in hip hop as kind of like some of the best artists in the game have progressed into their middle ages, I guess you could say, like people like Black Dot, who's like 50, Jay-Z, LP, Rock Marciano, who really is the poster child of like he only really became huge well into his 30s. One question I have is like, how have you been able to consistently improve and achieve this longevity of like consistent improvement? And then what do you think this trend of terrific music coming from our middle-aged rappers, what do you think that says about like the health of the game?
I think it's a variety of things. So I think as far as me personally, I think it comes from loving rap music and loving when it's done well and being obsessed with the craft. And, part of why I'm a battle rap nerd is because even if a lot of those dudes kind of rap similarly, there are a handful of them who not only do they rap very distinctly, but they rap damn near better than anybody else on the planet. So I'm always going to be tapped into people who are rapping incredibly well because I'm passionate about the craft. And teaching workshops as well, which I've been doing for nearly 10 years. Adsu and I, who co-host a show on Vans called Rec Shop Live, and shout out to Adsu, who's
still
one of the people from Chicago too, who showed us that we could make it without the industry, who had an independent hustle and still does not have a manager and has been wild. Out here going off and making moves for the past 15 years now, probably. But yeah, I mean, he like being around younger rappers, hearing what they're into, listening to it, and then just kind of checking my ego and reminding myself that hip hop didn't stop at, Enter the Wu-Tang. You know what I mean? Like it keeps evolving and it keeps turning into something different. And the bar is raised with every generation because I'm 32, right? So when I was in my formative years as a rapper, I was listening to not only all of the stuff that came before, but all of the stuff that was out, from The Message by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, all the way up to, at that point, I think that was, if we're talking the mid 2000s, like Dipset,
Yeah.
And then the MCs who are coming up after us now have all of that stuff, plus what was current when I was their age, plus what was current years after that, plus what's current now.
Yeah.
And access to all different kinds of hip hop that they can make. So I think that really constantly trying to build with like-minded MCs and learn from everybody I study has been what has kept me going, and I think has kept me fresh, and also leaning into what it is I do best and trying to add things to the skill set and trying to eliminate things that become redundancies. And I think that a lot of rappers who are kind of hitting their stride as well are guys like Rock Marciano and Ransom and 38 Spesh, who were people who were involved in the music industry, who I remember reading about in Double XL.
Yeah, in like early 2000s. Shit.
Yeah, or people who were on mixtapes that were really popular, who I think just at a certain point were like, okay, so if there's a market for what it is we do, why are we continuing to chase the same market that Drake is going after? That doesn't make any sense. Let's just make the stuff that we are really good at and people are going to flock to it. So yeah. I think I attribute that to the lessons that they learned from people like Doom and Sean Price too, who had second acts in their careers where they just kind of leaned into the stuff that they did best as MCs, and people bought into it and kept coming back for it. So yeah, I think that that's what I attribute it to. And also just, we're not all competing for the same fan base of, you know, the X amount of people who are super into mainstream hip hop. The world is the market. With the proliferation of the internet and all that. So my intention, if just speaking from personal experience, is every project out, I'm trying to find 5 new diehard fans. That's it. And then just kind of pull them into the flock, because each of them are going to go out and pull in more fans and more fans and more fans, and just so on and so forth. So as long as I'm consistent in terms of the quality of what I'm releasing, and as long as I'm not sacrificing quality for quantity, then it's pretty much inertia from there until I feel like I don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah, like doubling down on and like finding what you do well and just kind of honing in onto that and leaning into that is what we see from artists like you, Rock Marciano, and like people like Willie the Kid. I'm thinking, I hope I'm getting it not mixed up, but I remember I was listening to Dedication, one of the Dedication Wayne records. I was like, that can't be Willie the Kid.
Yeah,
and
he
I was
was
like,
on
this. Yeah, and I was like, what the fuck is going on? And then I was unaware. This was a few months ago. I wasn't unaware that he had all this career in the past, and he's also a guy that I really fucking love. But it's so clear that they found what they did well, like with the Marciano, that really like cool vibe he gives, and like that cool nonchalance shit that only he can do. Even on Marsburg, I don't feel like he even has that level. He's still rapping a little more like you would hear him on one of those like early 2000s cuts with the UN. But ever since Reloaded on, that's where his career started to kind of exponentially grow. It's because he found what he did well, and he's like, I don't need to have drums. That's one part, but it's like I don't even need to rap with any kind of like muster in my voice. Like I can just talk, and people are gonna love this because I'm fucking cool. And he was right. Like
and I say cool shit.
Yeah, and I say it's cool shit, and that's what I'm appeal to. Battle rapping too. This is something I found really cool because I've been seeing you talk about this on the timeline on Twitter recently, and you actually participated in a Twitter Spaces talk on this, and that's competition in hip hop. Yep. This is something I find really interesting because it kind of even extends outside of just the hip hop discussion. It's kind of just a general thing where I find like competition, they always say like it breeds like innovation, it like breeds like people like working on their craft. But some people view competition, especially with the art scene, as kind of like a negative thing. It puts people against each other, and it could be perceived as like being like a negative confrontational kind of environment. And I find that interesting in the context of hip hop with its huge foundations based on just like a competitive spirit. And like having to find a kind of like not be searching for validation, but still trying to like hone your craft. Like, how do you balance the competitive spirit while also like kind of being at peace with like who you are and understanding that like people do different things?
I mean, the competitive nature of it used to intimidate me for sure. And I think I used to let this idea of measuring my skill against somebody else's kind of bleed over into the business side of things. So I wasn't making as much money off of the music, or I wasn't getting the opportunities as everybody else, but I felt like I was rapping as good as they were, if not better. Then I think that built a lot of resentment up. But I think as far as the competitiveness and being able to maintain good relationships while also keeping that healthy spirit of competition, listening to Styles P interviews where he talks about working with the Locks, and he talks about Jada and Sheik, and how every time he goes into the studio, he's there to have the best verse on the song. He doesn't want to say that they bodied him on that. But they have worked together and had maybe the most solid creative partnership in hip hop. Never heard stories about them beefing, never heard stories about them falling out, never heard stories about them even having tension with one another. So those guys, those three in particular, I think in hearing that, it was like, okay, cool. I can want to go in the lab and body somebody on a song, but that doesn't mean that I don't want to see them win. It doesn't mean that I don't want them to be able to make money off of something that they love. And really the only time that sharper edge enters into the equation, when I feel kind of like legitimately pissed or angry or frustrated, tends to be with people who would rather destroy than build something. And especially when they're people who are, doing it from a place of resentment and trying to actively derail careers from that place. And that at that point is where the competitive nature of this steps into like a different sphere of emotion. But 98 to 99% of the time, when I'm being competitive with a friend of mine, it's because it would be for the same reason that I would want to beat them in a game of pickup basketball. It's not that I don't want them to be okay. It's just that in this particular case, I want to top whatever they are doing.
Yeah.
So.
No, that's good. I find that like idea of keeping like a foundational kind of like understanding that this is not to like destroy you, but it's just to in the love of improving your craft. I think that's key. I know in the interest of time, I know we were talking about 2:30 or 1:30 for you, whatever you wanted to you had to do some things, but I do and would be remiss if we don't talk quickly about some of these other hefty collaborations you had this year, because you really, like I said, released some crazy work. You had the Scenic Deluxe with Nick Arcade, as we discussed, and the We Dress the Sea with Our Names with August Fanon. I want to at least talk about the Fanon record as your most recent one. This was your first time on vinyl too, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah.
Filth Records.
Yeah. I mean,
that's
not
a
my
big
first
milestone.
time. My first time on vinyl is the headlining artist. I've been on a couple
as the headliner.
Vinyl as a rapper, but as like a guest artist. But this was the first Defcee vinyl. Yes.
Yeah. And so this one was a Style Wars graffiti inspired record, had beautiful production from Fanon and just incredible imagery from you as a rapper. And what I loved the most about what you did with this record was that I, as someone who's not too in tune with graffiti culture, like one, it kind of like put me into that world, gave me some information generally, but I really liked how you connected hip hop writing to graffiti tagging and like the parallels, because they just make instant sense, and the way you explored it, I think, was really special. So could you give us like your perspective on why graffiti is so important and intertwined in hip hop culture?
I mean, graffiti is the first element that appeared before turntablism, before breaking, before hip hop. And there were obviously in all of those different elements, there were prototypical sides of that were coming out before we acknowledged them as such. But graffiti was the first element of hip hop to really emerge and be something that was a part of the conversation. Mm-hmm. So, and it predates, and I know that it does all start with the DJ. So I don't want to disrespect or discount Kool Herc's contribution at the corners of Sedgwick and Cedar and August 11th, 1973, when the first block party is played. And that's the real birth of hip hop. But in terms of individual elements, graffiti was all over the city of New York before that block party happened. And I am always in awe of those graffiti writers who take certain risks, but also try to build community and try to teach kids to harness those gifts as a way of expressing themselves, because it's difficult for them to express themselves in other ways. And some of my favorite rappers of all time started as graffiti writers and then transitioned into rapping and took those transferable skills from graffiti writing, like an eye for imagery, into what they did as MCs, and made shit that was amazing and innovative and forward thinking. So yeah, it's my admiration for graffiti definitely runs deep. And part of what I tried to do on that EP was imagine my cadences as graffiti pieces, so that
that's amazing.
So that it was, when I was rhyming, you wouldn't know where it was going at first. You might not be able to guess what the next move would be, but by the time the verse was over, you had a complete picture of what I was trying to do.
Man, I feel it. That's when you say that, it's clicking. Like, I'm thinking of the last track, which I think is my favorite, one of the best songs, maybe my favorite song by you. It's just, it's that first line that you say, I'm forgetting it, but I remember just being so captivated by like the immediacy to where it's like, where the fuck is this going? Like, you immediately brought me into some vision, some picture, and by the end of it, we get it, and it's just, it's very heartfelt, and love of language is just seeping through that track. It's beautiful, and the Fanon beat too. Wow, wow, that one was the perfect touch.
Fanon is brilliant.
Yeah,
and I think people like him and Small Pro and Messiah Musik are and Knows the Time, Seb Severe, Golden Beats, On God, Slime are really kind of the future of the funk. Nick Arcade, they're the people who are making beats that are amazing to listen to. And I know that they're all kind of people who are within my circle. So there are definitely people like Twami and Gray Matter and who are outside of that circle, who are doing really cool, innovative stuff too, that I just want to listen to every time I get a chance. Mm-hmm. But they are drawing from the same wells of inspiration that a lot of other producers have drawn from, but they're using that to then create a sound that's a lot more fertile and a lot more interesting than those producers who just try to replicate what those legends did well.
Yeah.
So I'm incredibly lucky to have worked with Fanon. That was a connection, to bring it back to Iceberg Theory. That was a connection Iceberg made happen. Actually, in this, I haven't really spoken about this, but initially the verse that's on 50 on Trapdoor was the verse that was on Violets and Honey originally. So the first time I rapped on a Fanon beat, it was the 50 verse, and then it looked like that song wasn't going to come out. So then I threw it on that beat from Messiah, and it happened to just match perfectly. And then I wrote a new joint for Violets and Honey when it looked like that song was in fact going to come out. So yeah. And then I reached out to Iceberg and I said, do you think Fanon would be willing to work with me on something? And Iceberg said, yeah, absolutely. He liked your verse on this, and it was on from there.
That's dope, man. And I'm glad it happened, because that one felt like, yeah. And then when we get to Trapdoor, like it just seemed like there was a new level it's ascended. That's what I keep saying. This year just feel like there was a new something on was tapped in that was just so strong. But I do want to get to this record, and a big component of this Trapdoor release is that it's the first record under Backwoodz as a new signee. Can you tell me how the Backwoodz crew influenced the release in any significant way, and maybe the end product that ended up being Trapdoor?
Yeah, but I think if I want to talk about the Backwoodz influence, I think that dates back to when I first heard Woods and Elucid. So I heard Elucid's album produced by AM Breakup's super ill producer. And that album, under the name Cult Favorite, called For Madmen Only, fire. I loved the Woods verse on there. And then from there, I was just kind of hooked and well, not even kind of hooked. I was definitely hooked. And I was just tuned into everything that they were doing after that. So then you had Dour Candy. I've gone back and checked out History Will Absolve Me. And the music that they put out on that label, and the people who were in that universe were people who I just tried to build with, because they were super dope and they made music that spoke to me and spoke to what I was trying to do as a rapper. So obviously people like Castro, albums like Little Robert Hutton and Fidel and everything in between, super influential stuff I really loved. Prem Rock and Woods came to town, and they were on the bill for my first, and only to this day, nope, not only, on my first headlining show. It was Woods and Prem Rock and Tomorrow Kings. And just being able to kind of chop it up with them and kick it was a great experience. And yeah, I think that the influence that music has had on me has been really, really impactful, elevated what I do as a writer, given me different benchmarks to hit as an artist too, you know. So if I can't make anything that's as good as Load Bearing Crow's Feet, why try? If I can't make anything that's as good as Haram, why try? If I can't make anything as good as Little Robert Hutton, why try? And then just really trying to make music that is on par with that standard as often as I possibly can. But the conversations about this album and bringing it to Backwoodz happened that weekend when Woods was in town. Or nah, that wasn't even a weekend. That was the middle of the week when Woods was in town for that show. And I played him a few of the joints that I did over the Messiah beats, and he was into it. And I asked him if he'd be interested in putting it out. He said he was. And then through various stages of completion over the years, he remained true to his commitment to putting the album out. And by the time we wrapped it, 6 years had passed. And he had still remained committed to putting it out and having those conversations and making sure that people heard it. So, yeah.
There's definitely a lot of, dedication and kind of the trust. That sounds like it was just very much he trusted you, trusted the vision that this would be something worth putting out on the label, because that they obviously at this point have a pretty significant quality standard that everybody expects once it has the Backwoodz stamp.
And this year in particular, the fielded drops are really dope.
Yeah,
she's super fire. They started the year with an album that Alchemist produced, and then it was, which is Haram and Pray for Haiti are my top two of the year, definitely. And then from there, it was like, again, it was like a card game. It was, okay, who's going to have the winning hand this go round? And people just kept putting out quality material. That Load Bearing Crow's Feet is so good, man. That's a feast. That's a feast of an album, musically and writing wise as well. And then Castro's joint was so grand in scale and addressed so many things, but his style is so sharp. That you just can't help but be engaged by it. And then by the time you're able to get past how addicted you are to what he's doing stylistically with his delivery, to hear what he's saying is crazy too.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, it's been a pretty amazing year for Backwoodz. All I wanted to do was provide an entry into their catalog that was worth the reputation and the lineage of that label. I feel like I did that, and it's been a very rewarding experience to have worked so closely with them over the past several years to make this happen. And I got an Arm & Hammer feature on my shit, so I can't, you know, I'm good. You know what I mean? That's like a major bucket list thing.
Yeah.
So
yeah, Trapdoor feels very, very feels very personal to me. Mm-hmm. It gives me this feeling like I'm hearing secrets or like personal stories that you previously tucked away and hadn't shared publicly, let's say. And it's as if this album was like you exercising demons or emotions, and also like paving a way, showing a way forward to people that will come after you, maybe particularly your new child. Like that comes to mind, giving that very significant life event for you. And when I think of the title, I think of Trapdoor, because it's called Trapdoor. It's like opening the trapdoor in your mind, releasing some secrets or experiences. So what is the significance behind this title? And as we spoke about intentionality, like what was your overall intention behind this record?
I mean, your explanation of it is way better than mine in terms of the title, but I like the contradictory nature of that word trapdoor, where a trap is designed to keep you in one place for a specific set amount of time, if not forever. And then a door is supposed to be something that you can easily traverse to get into and out of different spaces. And so this album, the content and the things I'm addressing is from I was first emailing and communicating with Messiah about the music right up until the birth of my child 2.5 months ago, less than that. So there's been so much life that's been lived, and there have been so many lessons that I've learned. And one of the things I learned is that there are certain mindsets I've had that I thought were going to be very liberating that wound up being very constricting. So the idea of a song like Muscle on its face is about resilience, but actually it's about pretending to be resilient when you really should be relying on other people to help you get through something.
Wow.
That's difficult for you.
That's really powerful.
A song like Post, and how also a song like Muscle too is very specific, I think, to men my age. And then a song like Post, where having a kid has made me incredibly optimistic. And at the same time, I don't want to get so caught up in that optimism that I'm not realistic about the world that my kid's about to enter into. And then everything in between. So that's kind of what I've been thinking about. The title just kind of came to me. It wasn't really intentional. It just in going back and listening to the music, because the title was The Institute of Living, and which is a mental health facility in Connecticut where my dad grew up, and he told me about it. And then I went back and I researched it, and I found out that they were kind of implicated in a bunch of very shady things. So things like, you know, the electroshock therapy.
Oh shit.
They were doing things like, and they've since, you know, this has been entirely changed, and this particular thing was them being misled by the Catholic Church, but they were one of the facilities that housed Catholic priests who were accused of molestation and things of that nature under the guise of psychiatric treatment. And I just didn't want to put a name like that onto a project of mine. I felt like it made sense for that song, but I didn't feel like it made sense for the album as a whole.
Yeah.
So in going back and kind of listening to the stuff that I developed, Trapdoor just kind of came to my head like that. And then as I revisited the music, the word trapdoor made so much sense in terms of that, again, seemingly oxymoronic juxtaposition of those two words.
And that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And you have this powerful line at the end of Small Commutes where you say therapy or surgery, either way you got to open up, or that one way toward the exit, but it's blocked by what you won't confront.
Mm-hmm.
I find that shit like fucking just punch me in the face. Like I was like, again, the way you've like just ascended to this ability to where like just 2 bars can like sum up an entire thought, like so concise. I love that. But specifically about the content, I feel like this line, and then a lot, it's a very common theme, a motif or whatever, is just being honest with yourself, like looking in the mirror and like really being like, who am I? What am I doing? What am I actually, like muscle, the way you described that? It's like, what am I actually doing here? Mm-hmm. And, given the long recording process of 7+ years to create this, like, was it hard in a way to make? And did it feel almost therapeutic once you actually got to this point where you're able to divulge so much of you into the music?
I think it was therapeutic to write it. The verse that was the hardest to write was 50, but that was because I was writing it originally to that beat from Fanon, and I knew that I had to make sure that my raps on there could stand up with the people like Westside Gunn and Makami and Iceberg Theory who rapped on his work before. But I think for me, the writing wasn't the difficult part, because writing has kind of always been how I've processed things. The difficult part was recording like the back third of that album, or the middle third. I forget which it is. But songs like Time Off, songs like 50, songs like Commute, like those 3 songs in particular, it's difficult because it's one thing to write the words and it's another to say them and feel them. And those are 3 songs that address experiences I've had that have been really crushing in a variety of different ways. And even in them, those experiences being crushing for me, the thing that it's even more difficult is it has even more of a crushing impact on people who are directly affected by those incidents. Yeah. So the people who I cite in the hook for Commute, it's one thing for me to be grieving their loss, but it's another thing entirely for the people who are closer to them or for them. On Time Off, as much as I struggled with that job and going to work at it and coming home, I still got to come home at the end of the day. Those kids didn't get to come home. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them still are not home. So it was difficult to be able to bear the weight of those experiences as I was recording those 3 songs in particular. And 50 was a difficult song to record because I was determined to get it all in one take. So, damn, if I was messing up on the 5th bar, I had to go back, start from the beginning. And then a song like that specifically, I can't, it has to be the same emotion every time. I can't phone in something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to have to do that over and over and over and over and over again at a certain point it was a lot. It was a lot. So those were the 3 songs I think I had the most difficulty recording. I think there are some other emotions that are not as difficult for me to convey. So like I Can Rap Better Than You is not difficult for me to convey. Anger at the powers that be, not that difficult for me to convey. Things like sarcasm and all that, not that difficult. But I think those 3 songs, in terms of the emotion that I was expressing on them, was nuanced in a way that is difficult to express even in conversation, let alone rapping. So those were the 3 songs that were definitely the most difficult to record for this album.
And another like big theme about this record is passing down wisdom, is teaching, and obviously you are a teacher. And I found what I really liked about how you did this, incorporated these kind of topics into the music, is that it kind of fits into that trapdoor theme, in the sense that, as I was saying earlier, it's like on one hand you're really like divulging a lot of personal experiences, and it's kind of therapeutic on one end for you, but in a way you are helping others who are listening to this. And then it leads to the direct references of actually teaching that you talk about on this record. And it's obviously something that you've dedicated huge parts of your life to doing. Like, why do you find it so important to kind of speak and pass down knowledge to those coming after you? And what kind of gaps do you see currently in like how kids are kind of being treated in the modern day education system in the States?
So, great questions. So something that a friend of mine told me freshman year of college that was really important. I don't know, I was probably rambling about hip hop stuff because I was the only one in my friend group who was super into underground stuff. And that's something that I always kind of know background information about people. And he told me, like, you need to become a teacher. If you don't become a teacher, this knowledge is not going to be worthwhile to anybody but you. And that stuck in my head. I always wanted to be a teacher from the time I was 17 because I had a mentor named Peter Kahn who taught me in poetry and then wound up mentoring me as a teacher when I grew up, whose example I wanted to pay forward because it came very much from a place of empathy and compassion while also being realistic about the things I would need to know in order to navigate life after high school. And somebody like that, the best thing you can do to pay them back is to pay them forward. So I knew I wanted to be a teacher, but I don't know that I had a greater purpose as a teacher until that friend of mine said that. And then that just stuck in the back of my head. And I did work either within education or adjacent to education from the time I graduated college in 2012 through the present day. And I mean, it's important because, for one reason, education in the United States, and I don't know that this is much different from Canada or England or any other Western countries, really. We do a pretty terrible job of changing with the times. So a lot of the ways in which instruction is delivered has changed. A lot of curriculum has changed, but the structure of our school systems has not changed. So it's still like we're still operating within the same structure that was developed over 100 years ago. And we still are teaching the same things in the exact same ways. But you can't do that because you also were trained to strictly educate white kids 100 years ago, because those were the only kids who were allowed to have a public education in this country. So in addition to that, I think the other gaps that kids tend to face is you have teachers who are around at the beginning of this generational turnover who are now kind of nearing retirement age, but the kids are looking to develop relationships with teachers first so that they can trust that they're not going to be taken advantage of or treated unfairly before they're willing to just accept the authority of the person at the front of the classroom. So that's one major thing. And then obviously we, in the United States, do not address how institutional racism informs educational practice. And we just kind of, I don't know, we've been putting a Band-Aid over, a deep incision for a long time and pretending that it works. And we haven't been proactive, we've been reactive. We haven't been honest about how trauma impacts how kids learn. We haven't been honest about how mental illness impacts how kids learn. And we also haven't really been honest with kids there are certain things that we've demonized in terms of behaviors that the kids might engage in outside of school, but we're not realistic about how is it really all that possible to talk a kid out of a negative behavior if they haven't truly suffered the consequences of it yet.
Yeah.
And then how do you accept that student for who they are while you're still kind of encouraging them to grow at the same time? And then how do you deal with the fact that they're not going to learn what it is you want them to learn until they experience a consequence of it? Or there may be students who have experienced the consequence of certain things, and that's hardened them to that consequence. So then they're not afraid of it anymore. So there's like a bunch of stuff going on in education that I feel like is not being addressed or is starting to be addressed, which is great, but it hasn't been really institutionalized to the extent that it could be helpful for the kids now. And especially in light of COVID, I think this is the metaphor and I've been using for the past year and a half, 2 years. But yeah, I mean, we acted like it was one long snow day. And then we came back and we had the same academic expectations of these students, in spite of the fact that some of them, actually most of them, have been traumatized by being home for a year and a half during the pandemic. By the fact that there were so many kids who lost loved ones. There were kids who were on social media all the time, which is an entirely different conversation about the role that social media plays in interrupting public education. But you know, they were not going to class consistently because they were taking classes from home, or the things that they were able to escape that was at home by being in school were the things that they were fully immersed in because they were learning remotely. So just there are like a whole bunch of different things within public education that are not being addressed. And every school is different. Every school district is different. Every state is different. And then it's just an incredibly, and that's when you're considering the bureaucracy of public education, that's before even considering the fact that every student is different. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely been, for me, a lot about the serenity prayer of changing what I can and accepting what I can't. Yeah. And just trying to keep it moving from there.
Do you find, like, as someone in the actual work here, like, do you find the trend is like slowly we're going in a right direction? Like I as an outsider to all of this, I see like this stupid critical race theory discussion, which is like, I don't even really understand like how the states and like this political discussion is. It just seems like, what are you even talking about? And that worries me. I'm like, is this actually on the table? Are we actually talking like this? Like, this is insane.
Critical race theory, just to correct this, critical race theory is something that's specifically taught in law schools. It was something that was founded in law at Harvard Law School, I believe, Harvard's law school, that was taught to law students. There are elements of critical race theory that might show up in curricula that's taught when we're discussing race in high schools, but critical race theory is not taught in high schools in the United States.
It's very much a law-based, legal-based, trying to like, and it makes sense why it's taught there because it's important to know, but
like, and kids like, you know how many Latin terms you got to learn in law school before you even get to critical race theory? Shit is crazy. So then I look at that. I look at the banning of all of these books. I look at, it's a state by state thing. I think another thing that states are struggling with as well, and something that American public education and a lot of other countries' public education systems have been struggling with for a long time, is this idea of data as a predictor of academic success, as opposed to a more holistic approach to addressing students' social emotional needs so that they're in a clear enough headspace that they can learn. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's so many different conversations that are happening, and you'd get a headache wrestling with two of them, but there are so many that you pretty much, as an educator, just kind of have to deal with the young people who are in front of them, who are in front of you, and what they need. And if you're addressing those needs, even if you're only reaching one kid in each class, you're doing something right.
Yeah.
You can
No,
never,
I think that's a good mentality. You can kind of apply it to a lot of things where if you feel like everything's out of your control, then it's better to just try to think about what's in your control and just move the needle, even if it's just one kid, like you said. Like that's important.
And let's be honest here too. I think I'm a white teacher who was trained by a university to teach white kids. We didn't really talk about race all that much. So except for when I was bringing the conversation up. So now that race and conversations about race are entering classrooms, white parents are panicking. There are white parents who know that they're panicking because they know that if their kids learn the truth, then the kids are going to start questioning a whole lot of foundational stuff at home. And then there are white parents who are freaking out, don't know why they're freaking out, but are just parroting other bullshit reasons for why they should be freaking out over the fact that we're talking about racism in schools.
Yeah.
Like it's basically, if we were teaching Holocaust denial at the rate with which, and this is me saying this as a Jew, because I don't want anyone to get it misconstrued. If we were preaching Holocaust denial in the same ways in which they're trying to
deny racism
and slavery and the realities of like the most brutal period in the history of this country that still is a major foundational principle of how people are treated in this country if they're black and brown.
Resources were distributed.
I mean, it's so just for me, it's a lot of people are scared of, they're either ashamed of being wrong or they're scared of learning the truth, because then a whole bunch of stuff in their minds will crumble before their eyes. So they don't see it as the apology that needs to be made before you can repair what's been broken, which isn't even possible if you look at the scale of institutional racism within the United States. But they're looking at it more as like, I think a lot of white people try to protect our feelings before we're really ready to hear honesty about what it is we've done and our impact. So yeah, I know I answered a lot of questions that you didn't particularly ask me.
No, man, that's I especially coming from someone like you. Like it's I'm very fascinated by the conversation. It's very important. But if we go back to Trapdoor more specifically now, we have to talk about the production and Messiah Music's contribution to this, because obviously just like flatly, like if I just heard these instrumentals in a vacuum without any of the context of the record and the themes, it would sound amazing. It's Messiah Musik. He's one of the best producers out. But what I really liked about this album is that I felt like his beats were really like paired well with the content and the vibe and the themes. Like it was shrouded in darkness. It was eerie. But there was like, it's very reminiscent to like, if you're like looking in a trapdoor in some attic, like I just get that feeling, even like the album cover, which I'm blocking right now, just that feeling. But there was really a few moments of like when things were brighter, it really feels beautiful. And I really liked that marriage. Why do you think, and how did you and Messiah collaborate towards this? Like, did you give him some kind of guidance to like what you were looking for, or did he kind of hear what you were saying and kind of tried to paint around that? How did that all work?
Yo, you know what's crazy is that it's the simplest collaboration ever. Messiah makes beats and sends me packs, and I just pick what I like. That's it. And then I also, in addition to crediting Messiah for just being somebody who has an incredible ear for music and breaks and loops and the ability to bring textures and emotions out of these beats that a lesser producer would just kind of leave dry as hell and sounding like a RZA knockoff. In addition to giving Messiah his due, I also got to give Willie Green his due as well, because this album was 2-tracked. So we didn't have stems for the beats. So Messiah would just send waves of the beats,
Wow.
And what Green did with these beats is amazing. Like, this is an
That's
album
crazy.
that when I first turned in the pre-mix master, I thought it was going to be a headphone album, you know, like it's something you listen to when you're like zoning out, or like a Bluetooth album, you're at the crib, you know, just trying to listen to music. This knocks in the car. This
Oh
album
yeah.
like, really knocks. Compassion, especially the bass line on Compassion, is like, I remember being in the car, I almost crashed because I literally had to pull over and text Messiah and be like, have you listened to Compassion in your car yet? And he said, no, he hadn't. That was when I hit him with all of the exclamation points in capital letters about how he needed to go get in his car to listen to it right now. So yeah, I mean, I got to give Green a lot of props as well, but no, Messiah is such a good producer that really the things he makes, if he sends you 100 beats and you pick 10, you've got a classic album.
Yeah.
It's kind of whatever mood it is you're going for, as long as you have an ear that's sharp enough to grab the best 10. So yeah, I think it was just kind of a matter of putting them together over the years, putting them in playlists, trying to find ways for them to fit together. And yeah, I mean, just both of us kind of sharpening our crafts over the years before finally recording and releasing this album.
And were the beats that you chose mainly newer beats that he had done, or like did you select some Messiah Musik beats from like 2015?
I mean, there are beats on there that he made for me in 2015. There are beats on there that were in the initial packs he sent me in like late 2013, early 2014. So, you know, there are like some joints that did get swapped out. There are some older joints that I made songs to that we're gonna hold for the next album. So
You guys have another album you're working on together?
Yeah. I mean, can't. Look, if I make one album with Messiah Musik, I'm making another one.
I mean, yeah, why not, man?
If for no other reason than I cannot just rap over his beats for a whole album once. That's happening again. So yeah, I'm just very fortunate in that I get to work with a lot of producers who are just kind of in the primes of their careers, and there's no downhill slide in sight.
Yeah, and I think you get, like you said, you deserve credit too for having the ear to pick them out, because like all these records have a distinct sound. Like I like the Scenic Deluxe, man, that just there's a certain kind of wackiness or just like explosive weirdness that Nick Arcade. I haven't been so familiar with his records, but I've heard a few, and I heard that one specifically. And yeah, it's just so interesting, the sample work that he does. It's just super cool. August Fanon's was, I said this before actually when I did like a little piece on the record, that I feel like you picked the cleanest, like most pretty August Fanon beats I've ever heard him make. And that's saying something. Like that Alive beat, like that, it was like you could listen to this in a park with like birds flying around, like sentimental, like. And then this one is just so dark and precise. Like it fit, all of these just fit really well sonically with what you were going for.
I appreciate it, man. And I do have to give big ups to Nick Arcade, because that Scenic creative partnership, everything that I think a lot of the love that I'm getting right now as a rapper, because anything Messiah touches is going to get love because it's amazing. But it all starts with Nick being willing to put together an EP in 8 days, and him just kind of sending those beats to me, writing, knocking it out, dropping it, and then being willing to double back and make 5 more. And the thing that I love about Nick Arcade's beats is it kind of like, if I were to compare it to playing styles of like basketball players, right? Like you could tell where somebody like LeBron is like a marriage of skill sets he picked up from Magic Johnson and Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
And obviously other players, I'm sure, that I'm just not knowledgeable enough to be able to recognize in his style. But Nick is from that doom Mad Lib side of things, where he makes these incredibly off-kilter beats that are phenomenal.
Yeah.
And dissonant. And
that
I
Rich
feel like
Jones one, man. I'm trying to think the Add To one. Oh my God.
Where the drums knock. And that's why I don't want to call it lo-fi, because everything knocks. Like everything he makes knocks and sounds super clean. But yeah, he's incredible. And Fanon as well. Fanon would probably be kind of like in that Pete Rock, like the other side of Pete Rock's influence from Small Pro. So just, yeah, beautiful loops, beautiful breaks. And then Messiah, the thing I've been saying, and I'll probably say this on every podcast where people ask me about Messiah, it sounds like the beats RZA lost in the flood. Like Messiah he grabbed those, and we've all been reaping the benefits of them in the underground for like the past 10 years, you know?
Yeah. I mean, when you say RZA, like RZA, obviously Messiah like has that rugged feel that a RZA beat would have, but especially RZA's later work, like he was definitely moving to like that cinematic, like even just his 2000s post like 2000s work, that initial run, like he was definitely going to more like pretty cinematic, a lot more orchestral sounds. And I find like Messiah does a really great job of like making shit rugged, but there's like really beautiful flashes of jazz and other kind of textures that I do feel like RZA was going for. And I don't prefer that to what he did in the 90s, but Messiah, the way he did that is just so unique.
Yeah, Messiah will, like, I think where some producers would grab the horn sample, like the main loop of a horn sample, like maybe the main 5 notes, Messiah will grab the last 2 notes of the solo, and it sounds phenomenal. So he hears things in the samples he picks and the breaks he uses that nobody else would be able to hear, and is also able to express emotions in his music that nobody else would be able to express. So I think a major reason why Trapdoor works as well as it does is because he and I were communicating on a different frequency through the music we were making. And there was something about what he was doing that was bringing those rhymes out of me. And I hope that energy went the other way too. So.
Yeah, man. I'm sure it did. Listen, this has been a great conversation. I love the insight that you gave towards all your work and just on other topics generally outside of music. That was very enlightening. Before you do go, I want to just give you a moment to talk about any upcoming work you have. Particularly one I'm going to call out is because I saw you tweeted it. It's a album with Solar 5 and Green Slime that will put people in a headlock, like you said. So could you elaborate on that and just anything else you got coming up?
All right. So that's not coming out. I want it to come out next year. I don't want people to think it's going to be Q1 or Q2 though, because we got to go back in. I'm not going to be recording any new material for quite some time. So, you know, I want to go back in and kind of revise some of this stuff so that we have the best possible takes to put out to back up all this shit I've been talking. But it's crazy. It's an album where we make the songs, and then there was a moment where I just looked across the room at Solar 5 and we just shook our heads like we couldn't believe we made it.
Are Solar 5 and Green Slime, are they like the main producers on that?
Yeah. Yes. And then we have a joint from Messiah, and we have a joint from Seb Severe, who I'm doing an album with next year. So the Def Severe album is coming next year. I have an album with Boathouse that's coming out on Closed Sessions next year. The Def Prez album, which was supposed to drop this year, is dropping next year. I don't know when it'll be coming, but I've got music in the cut with people like Disco Vietnam and Ray West, and some more work with Knows the Time. Just like next year is going to be really, really dope. I think if people were rocking with what we did this year, next year is all about elevation. And I just hope that people who got hooked by what I did this year enjoy what they're in for next year.
I'm sure they will, man. I'm sure they will. Those sound fucking intriguing.
Yeah.
All right, man. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, and just all the best with your 2022 and being a father and all of the good stuff that come with that. So thank you. I really, really appreciate what you're bringing to the music game right now.
Thank you. And thank you again for being such an ardent supporter of what we do and really trying to spread the word. And again, you know, people in the underground lean on voices like yours when it comes to what they tune into, what they enjoy, and then what they feel comfortable spreading the word about as well. So thank you for all the work you've done this year to really bring a lot of light to our corner of the underground. I appreciate you.
It means a lot to hear that from you, man. Thank you. Thank you so much, and take care.
All right, you too. Peace.
Peace. So this concludes today's episode of the Rap Music Plug podcast presented by QLC TV. I hope this episode gave you some fresh new perspectives on the latest rap releases, as well as a recommendation for the next great rap record to add to your collection. If you're an artist looking to level up your career, getting more gigs, album sales, merch sales, whatever it may be, I would love to help you with that by providing you artist development and writing services. So if you're interested, contact me via email at qlctv.podcast@gmail.com or hit me up via Twitter or Instagram at rapmusicplugpod. I would be honored to lend my expertise and help you grow your career as an artist. And also for regular rap fans that just want to hear more quality commentary on the genre, follow me on Twitter and Instagram as well. For exclusive content and updates related to the show, follow the Rap Music Plug podcast on Facebook to help the show grow and ensure that everyone's listening to the best rap music at all times. Follow the show on the podcast platform of your choice. Make sure you leave a review and rating on Apple Podcasts so that the show can be spotlighted by that wonderful algorithm and be exposed to more people. You can find all of this information along with exclusive playlists created by myself by clicking the link that's in the episode's notes. So that's all for today. Talk to you soon. Peace.